Hello, students. Welcome to my class on John Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 1, Part 2. I am Professor Jaspreet Kaur, Associate Professor at Khalsa College, Patiala, in the Postgraduate Department of English, Cultural Studies, and Foreign Languages. Immediately after the prologue, Milton raises the question of how Adam and Eve's disobedience occurred and explains that their actions were partly due to a serpent's deception. This serpent is Satan, and the poem joins him and his followers in hell, where they have just been cast after being defeated by God in heaven. Satan lies stunned beside his second in command, Beelzebub, in a lake of fire that gives off darkness instead of light. This is the scenario of hell. Breaking the awful silence, Satan bemoans their terrible position, but does not repent of his rebellion against God, suggesting that they might gather their forces for another attack. Beelzebub is doubtful. He now believes that God cannot be overpowered. Satan does not fully contradict this assessment, but suggests that they could at least prevent God's good works to evil purposes. The two devils then rise up and, spreading their wings, fly over to the dry land next to the flaming lake. But they can undertake this action only because God has allowed them to loose their chains. All of the devils were formerly angels who chose to follow Satan in his rebellion against God, and God still intends to turn their evil deeds towards the good. Once out of the lake, Satan becomes more optimistic about their situation. He calls the rest of the fallen angels, his legions, to join him on land. And they immediately obey, and despite their wounds and suffering, fly up together on the plain. Milton lists some of the more notable of the angels whose names have been erased from the books of heaven, noting that later, in the times of man, many of these devils come to be worshipped as gods. Among these are Moloch, who is later known as a god requiring human sacrifices, and there is another, Belial, a lewd and lustful god. Still in war gear, these fallen angels have thousands of banners raised and their shields and spears in hand. Even in defeat, they are an awesome army to behold. Satan's unrepentant evil nature is unwavering. Even cast down in defeat, he does not consider changing his ways. He insists to his fellow angels that their delight will be in doing evil, not good. In particular, as he explains to Beelzebub, he wishes to pervert God's will and find a way to make evil out of good. It is not easy for Satan to maintain this determination. The battle has just demonstrated God's overwhelming power, and the fallen angels could not even have lifted themselves off the lake of fire unless God had allowed it. God allows it precisely because he intends to turn their evil designs towards a greater good in the end. Satan's envy of the Son's chosen status led him to rebel and consequently to be condemned. His continued envy and search for freedom leads him to believe that he would rather be a king in hell than a servant in heaven. Satan's pride has caused him to believe that his own free intellect is as great as God's will. Satan addresses his comrades and acknowledges their shame in falling to the heavenly forces, but urges them to gather in order to consider whether another war is feasible. Instantly, the legions of devils dig into the bowels of the ground, unearthing gold and other minerals. With their inhuman powers, they construct a great temple in a short time, which is known as Pandemonium. And the hundreds of thousands of demonic troops gather there to hold a summit. Being spirits, they can easily shrink from huge winged creatures to the smallest size. Compacting themselves, they enter Pandemonium and the debate begins. Now, let us make an overview of the epic poem Paradise Lost, Book 1, written by John Milton. Paradise Lost is an epic poem written in blank verse by the 17th century English poet John Milton. It was originally published in 1667 with a total of over 10,000 individual lines of verse in 10 books. A second edition followed in 1674, redivided into 12 books, with minor revisions throughout and a note on the versification. Most of the poem was written while Milton was blind and was transcribed for him. The poem concerns the Christian story of the fall of man, the temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Milton's purpose, stated in Book 1, is to justify the ways of God to man and elucidate the conflict between God's eternal foresight and free will. Although the primary event in the epic is about the fall of man, the character Satan serves as an anti-hero and as a prominent driving force in the plot. Thank you so much for watching the presentation.